Welcome to this episode of the Justice Team podcast on the Justice Team Network. Today, we're going to be talking to the grief counselor, attorney Lauren Hoffman, who is going to share with us some of her personal experience, how us out there can better connect with our clients, how they can understand. Is it an emotion? What would you consider grief?
Yeah, probably an emotion, a process. Grief is a process.
Okay. I mean, I just saw that movie. Is it Elemental? Was it Elementals? No, it's the Disney Pixar one.
Yes.
I don't know. I always get the two mixed up, but the new one just came out, Inside Out.
Inside Out, yes.
Inside Out. So I don't know if grief was an emotion in there, but
I'm not sure. I haven't seen that movie
well,
yet.
you should. It might be good. It might be good. But we're talking today about how we can be better advocates for our clients, and one of those things is better understanding grief. For a lot of lawyers and law students out there listening, one of the big damage awards that you do get in jury trials is what we call general damages, which is pain, suffering, anxiety. Grief is one of the categories, especially in California, that can specifically be awarded. Well, Lauren Hoffman, thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
You still in the San Diego area?
No, I'm over in Los Angeles now.
Nice.
Yeah, I live in Santa Monica, but I'm all over LA a lot of times.
Santa Monica, the Bay. Yeah, I used to live in Santa Monica, and it's hard to get in and out of these days.
Yeah, it is. There's so many people coming over to the West Side.
Yeah, it is nice though. I mean, they have some nice hotels. A lot of conventions come there and conferences. They always seem to pick Santa Monica. So, Lauren, can you just explain to us a little bit about the background that you have in it and the kind of the process you go through?
Yeah. So for grief specifically myself, when I was 16 years old, my best friend, he passed away in a motor vehicle accident. And it was due to a negligent driver who was not wearing her prescription glasses at the time, and she sideswiped him.
Wow.
And then his helmet actually broke. So when he fell down, he didn't even have a helmet to.
Was he on a bicycle or motorcycle?
He was on a moped.
Oh.
Yeah. And so that was when I was 16, and it just drastically changed my life. Changed everything for me, gave me such passion and empathy for people who are going through grief. And just for people who, even if it's a loss of a functional use of a body part, or if it's grieving the loss of a loved one, like all grief matters. And I think it's just given me so much of a new perspective, and it just makes me want to help other people.
Yeah, when you do, you've mentioned this before, but being a lawyer and advocate, you end up being their therapist. I mean, your clients communicate with you more than sometimes their spouse, their friends, and because you do also have the attorney-client privilege when you're discussing these things. So, how does it help you be a better advocate? Like, what practice points can you give lawyers out there to help our clients better?
Oh, gosh. Well, first and foremost, I think we have to remember that it's such a privilege to get to walk through a season of grief with clients. Like, it's a huge deal. And I think a lot of times as lawyers, we're so rushed. Like, we have so many things to do that the last thing we're thinking of when we have discovery due is, oh, I want to be my client's counselor. It's just not high on the agenda for us, but it should be, because it's such a privilege that they're allowing us to be in on their grief, and that they're allowing us to witness such a monumental and difficult part of their lives. So that's first. Just having that posture going into speaking to a client, whether it's your first meeting or your last meeting or discovery or whatever it may be, this idea of this is a privilege that I get to do this with them and be in it with them, because they're absolutely in the trenches.
Well, and I've seen some lawyers, because you are a very empathetic person, you show empathy. I see some lawyers that treat their clients like a widget. They don't want to talk to them. It's an inconvenience when the client is sharing with them all the problems that they're having. I mean, how is it a personality thing? How do we better get over that? I mean, can we use processes or email, text to do it? Like, what are some suggestions you can give us?
Yeah, that's such a good question. I feel like really just being able to listen to your client, giving them a space to open up, and however they're comfortable doing it. If they feel comfortable over email, that's great. I think a lot of the clients that I've talked to, they prefer doing it over the phone or over a Zoom call so that it feels very personal, because to them it's so personal. And so however they feel most comfortable to connect on their grief, allowing them that space to do it.
That's powerful, because like a lot of people, we're in a world right now where virtual is accepted. It's okay.
Yeah.
And for you, those of watching or listening, think about if you have a doctor, a medical professional. I mean, how nice would it be to be on a text message chain with your doctor, to ask questions, to have empathy, or to have a video call with them, right?
Yes.
And it's the same service we should be giving our clients. And like, I do think it's important whenever we're documenting, because we're representing a lot of folks, we can't get that information lost.
Yeah.
So how are you using that so that a year, 2 years later, when the case finally gets to trial, that you don't forget about those early conversations that you've had with the client?
Right. And it's so important to do that, because a lot of times it's so hard for us to do the two at once, right? It's hard to be totally present with your client and really giving them the space to open up, while also saying, okay, I need to think in the present and also think about how I'm going to use their story at trial. So I just try to be as present as I possibly can and intentionally listen, ask questions. And then after I get out of, whether I'm drafting discovery, whether it's a demand, whatever it may be, I then go right to my note sheet and write down everything that I can remember from whatever we talked about. And even the small things, like especially when it comes to home visits and like making sure that you're taking a look at what's around you, and even just seeing the small things that, have made it hard on your client, whatever it may be.
Yeah, and some practice points for those of you that are out there. It is attorney-client privilege, so you can tell them that they can open up more, and you can choose what to put into discovery when they verify those answers.
Yeah.
So what I do think is important, if you are doing a Zoom meeting, you can ask permission to record it, to use some of the AI tools that you have. That way you can be present with your clients. Then you can get the summary thereafter, which you can save as a note within the file. And if you're on a system, any case management system, if you're having a client use the text message number that you have through your case management system, they automatically go into the file. Again, it's attorney-client privilege, but allows you to go back 2 years and look back at all the notes and see everything that's been going on. And it is powerful. I mean, when we're trying cases, you have to be able to pick specific moments in time and tell their story.
Which makes a lot of sense. And it adds so much value to a case. And I think it's one of those things where a lot of times you're not necessarily thinking about that in the stage of litigation. You're not thinking about, okay, this is really important for trial, because you're not thinking from a trial perspective when you're doing discovery. But I work with attorney Savvy Fisher, and he talks all the time about how important it is that we're constantly thinking about trial and litigating a case from a trial.
Yeah, and you got to think about, if what you're writing in those verified responses in discovery, if somebody puts those on a screen at trial, how's that going to play? Right?
Yeah, exactly.
So you got to think about the wording,
Yes.
like read it so a jury can read it and understand it and empathize with it, right?
For sure.
And there's a delicate balance here, because you don't want your client to come off as a woe is me person, right?
Yes.
It comes to a point of like, this is my story, this is how I'm dealing with it. But what are some things that you see clients try to either self-help with or other professionals that they can use to go through their grief counseling? And because lawyers always ask me, like, I have a wrongful death case. Should I send them to like this high-paid psychologist? Like, what are some things that you think we could be doing for our clients that are when you're not the grief counselor?
That makes sense. Yeah, absolutely. Talking to a therapist is super important. Just being able to have a space to share their grief other than us, because at the end of the day, as much as we want to be their grief counselor, we're not counselors. We're licensed as lawyers, and we are counselors at law. So it's important that we send them out places where they're able to actually go through that grief. And then it's also good because that grief is documented in a way that we aren't able to necessarily document it.
Yeah, and in our podcast room we're shooting today from Los Angeles, California, we do have some pre-roll cannabis products. While you cannot send them to your client to help them cope with their grief, you can use a product called ease.com. They don't sponsor the show, but like we use Ease to deliver marijuana here in California. I guess real quick. Siri, can you set me a reminder in 10 minutes to order some Ease cannabis products so I can sleep at night? Sorry, that reminded me.
No, that's great. Of course. Of course.
Thank you, Siri. All right. So what other things can you identify? We've talked about the discovery process, the home visits, which I think is infinitely important. What are some other things as you go through and get closer to trial that we can help the client through this process?
Gosh, I think really understanding their story and understanding the place that they're coming from, because for some people, their grief feels so intricate. And even though grief isn't fatal, it feels like it could be sometimes. Mm-hmm. And so it's important to really actually want to walk through that season with our clients. And for me personally, at least, I feel like that starts in drafting a demand letter. And it feels like such a small task, but that's right. I mean, it could be during pre-lit, but it's right after it comes out of pre-lit. And so you're looking at it and you're saying, okay, what is this person's story? And it's essentially the first phone call you're going to have, aside from intake.
So is that an editable document, whereas the story changes and continues. It's like writing a movie script, right? So as the case evolves, you get more information from the client. That story is evolving.
Yeah, you're able to make you're able to get a non-linear version of their story, so to speak. And linear in some ways, I guess, because it's constantly building on itself, but really actually understanding where your client is coming from and knowing them from the get-go is going to help so much as a case is moving through the litigation process, 100%.
Yeah. And one thing, when we talk about medical professionals for our clients, my personal preference is rather than go to that normally retained psychologist is to have somebody go to a true therapist of, somebody. I always think, what would a person do if they went through and lost a loved one? They go to church, they go through the church therapist, they would go to the local therapist, somebody that they can talk to. And just my experience being a trial lawyer is it's very powerful when you have a person that comes in that's not this polished psychologist that went to Yale and has all this fancy thing. It's like, no, they're just in the community helping people as a licensed therapist.
Yes,
right?
Absolutely.
And then they can actually get in a lot of the client's story through that therapist, again, without having your client to go up there and say, woe was me.
Yeah, no, for sure.
So, Lauren, as our time comes here to an end, I want people, how can they reach out to you if they can reach for pointers as the grief counselor or practice points on trying and litigating cases? How do we find you?
Yeah, please reach out, especially if you have any questions on grief. I feel super passionate about it. You can find me on Instagram at JusticeTeamLauren, or you can reach me at lauren@justicesteam.com.
I love it. Well, Lauren, thank you for coming on. Any listeners out there, if you want to reach out to Lauren, do those means, please. She has a lot of good, worksheets and stuff that she goes through with our clients and samples. Any questions, go to thejusticesteamnetwork.com. You can ping us there. And thank you for listening to this episode of the Justice Team Podcast with Lauren Hoffman.
Thank you.
Thank you all.